I heard somebody was killed on 77 today.
77? Oh, somebody mentioned it was the roads were backed up
This morning.
this morning.
Anybody been killed on 77 or near here?
Who did? Somebody was killed, but there was a.
I
Where's
heard
that
there were
bad
2
one?
people killed.
I printed my own.
I did. Thank you. Appreciate it.
It's a one car.
Okay.
That's what Sarah heard, I think. Yeah.
I have 6 o'clock. Call the Downtown Planning Steer Committee meeting number 14, December 1st. To order. The first item on the agenda is to call the roll.
Thank you.
Jack.
Nate Bowman. Here. Gatewood Campbell.
Here.
Doug Ferguson.
Here.
Sean Flynn.
Here.
John Foster. Charles Gignard.
Here.
Lee Holman.
Here.
Janelle Harris.
Here.
Wayne Kearns.
Here.
Bob Lemon.
Here.
Sarah McCauley.
Here.
Elizabeth Rodriguez.
Here.
Cindy Trevason.
Here.
Jessica Tucker. Okay, ex officio, April Dunn. Thank you. Barbara Gephardt.
Here.
Kathy Jones.
Here.
John McClellan.
Here.
Diane McLean.
Here.
John O'Neill. Mike Russell. Stephen Swanek. Thank you.
Ask any elected officials to please stand and identify yourself. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 3, approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
There's a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the November 3rd, 2022 minutes as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The chairman's remarks, I don't have any at this point, but general public comments. Anybody sign up? Next item is number 7, presentation of the draft master plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. It's an honor to be here tonight. As was mentioned, tonight is sort of the culmination of the master planning draft activities since public forum that took place a couple of months ago. And this is really the opportunity to share with the committee all the comments as they are integrated into this draft plan that we've received from the community, from yourselves, from staff, throughout this period of time here. So what we're going to do tonight is share these plans and graphics with you, have some discussion here, which will inform us as we prepare our final plan. So this is a great opportunity to have some last final comments this evening, and then as you look at, okay, I'm sorry. And just so everybody knows, we are printing copies of the plans for you, so you can look at those as we go through the presentation. That should be out momentarily, so bear with us, please. So again, with that said, this is the draft master plan. Again, this is the culmination of the conversations over the past several weeks. And what you see here is we've integrated a number of elements here that gives us this final compilation here. And what you'll see is a final expression of the block types, which is, again, as we've been sharing all along, an opportunity to show envelopes for different development opportunities and building types. So we've organized these based upon a pattern that's evolved through the course of this process here. You also see the block features, which includes everything from historic buildings, parking areas, open spaces. And we've also, within that layer, introduced ideas about building heights, so you have an understanding in terms of the scale of buildings that we're thinking about. And again, this is pulling in together a lot of the comments that have taken place over the past several weeks. And you see, in the bright red, where we're looking at those proposed active frontages. So again, we'll talk about that in a moment here, but really this is the master plan expression that gives us guidance as we look at looking at some of these other recommendations that will be part of the final master plan. You see the layer on here also with the open space and some of the elements associated with that, which includes stormwater, attitudes about where those are located. You see the trail networks existing and proposed, and you also see the transportation elements, which include obviously the existing streets, proposed improved streets based upon the current capital improvement plan, and also new streets that have emerged through this planning process. You see also dashed on here one street in particular, the East-West Connector. We, through conversation and a brilliant idea, looked at showing that as a proposed street that perhaps happens in the future, but it's done in an incremental manner, and there's contingent elements in which that might unfold. So again, we wanted to have that be in the plan, not a driver of the plan, but something that can help inform things as things unfold. Other elements you see just in terms of existing and proposed signalization in and around the downtown. Again, all these components meld together into the plan. Now, of course, the master plan is underpinned by the organizing principles that we work together to establish. So as we peel these layers back, we wanted to, again, reinforce a lot of the key recommendations on each one of those organizing principles. So, of course, mobility being that first layer, you'll recognize and see a lot of familiar recommendations and driving statements in terms of the attitude about Gilead Road, for instance, that it should not be widened. It should be a multimodal street. Streets in general, it should be an interconnected system where streetscapes are enhanced, improved to provide wider sidewalks, landscape opportunities, and all manner of walkable components to help mobility within and around the downtown. You see a couple of key streets, certainly the Walter Street improvement, the extension of South Church Street, and interwoven with all these streets are, of course, the paths, the trails, existing and proposed, and how they begin to link and connect together to provide that thread of mobility throughout your downtown. Another key organizing principle, nature. Again, a driving force of this is the attitude about the existing water courses, the stream channels, small, and as they grow larger into each of the watershed basin areas, the Catawba River and the Yadkin-Petey River watershed in particular. They must be protected and preserved. And are there the opportunities to look at some regional stormwater facilities at the headwaters of these tributaries here to really begin to demonstrate a very responsive approach to integrating nature within your downtown. An excellent opportunity. You see, again, through the course of this discussion, we're looking at opportunities to enhance and grow some of the existing parks. Holbrook Park, a lot of talk about how that can be enlarged, or, widened. Are there land opportunities, some land banking opportunities to really establish and extend that park system? Looking for those intentional touch points into the greenways. Lots of opportunities, again, as roadways interface with these fingers of greenways. Is there a way to intentionally allow for connections into those greenway systems through pathways, accessible features and amenities that signify these are connections of the greenway system? And identifying those key parks within your downtown. Of course, the one that we start with is the town square along Huntersville Concord Road. And as we know, there's a number of different configurations with that. But the goal is to connect these larger greenway systems that are really gateways into the nature and natural environment with some a hierarchy of more urban spaces that bring you into the downtown. So there are no gaps, if you will, within the greenway system in and around your downtown. Other key parks and opportunities. We talked about Magla Mills Park. Be a wonderful opportunity to preserve trees in and around Walters Street, particularly at the corner there with 2nd Street. Other Gateway Park opportunities along the road associated with the CMS school. Is there an opportunity to make that an intentional park and open space that gives you another gateway access into the greenway system? We talked about in the southeast quadrant, a wonderful opportunity there to extend the natural greenway and have that touch upon the Seam Trail and how that might extend northward along South Church Street and on up to North Church Street. So again, nature, the organizing principle, these key recommendations, these are the underpinning elements of the master plan. Gathering, of course, we talked about that, a layered approach to gathering in the downtown, where we're really focused on that core gathering area, those 4-6 blocks in and around the core downtown, and how does that begin to overlap some of these key amenities, such as the open space, the entrance into Holbrook Park, some of these new park areas that we're trying to incorporate. This key gathering area, this is where we need to pay particular attention to all the enhancements and other elements that make this a true gathering place that can sustain small groups and larger groups. That's the wonderful opportunity that you have with the spaces that you have existing in your downtown and how they might grow to expand into some larger events and activities. In a layered approach, we look at not only that core, 4 to 6 block area, but how does that begin to expand into that quarter-mile radius of your downtown core? That's really your 5-minute walkable area. So when we talk about gathering, we certainly want to look at a layered approach. We're not looking at just that core, but how does that begin to filter out and reach out and invite the other perimeter areas of your downtown area. Living, of course, a key aspect, key organizing principle. First and foremost, we want to protect, respect, and invite the surrounding neighborhoods as that transitions from the downtown area into the perimeter. And I certainly want to respect and embrace the existing neighborhoods and enclaves within the downtown area. In doing so, how can we look at integrating new living opportunities in an incremental fashion which respects the existing grain and fabric of your downtown, but allows for a very context-sensitive evolution based upon ownership patterns as they evolve over time. So we also looked at, obviously, the opportunity for some interesting new housing typologies in your downtown core, that core gathering area, where we can look at some mixed-use living above commercial activities in your downtown area to really provide that robust and vibrant downtown area. So again, looking at these opportunities together with living was a key component, again, underpinning the master plan. Civic, again, another key organizing principle. Over the course of this process, I know we're looking at a number of different town hall locations. Fantastic, one was selected just to the north of this building here. So that really provides that anchor, an opportunity to talk about civic activity in and around the downtown as that unfolds, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Other civic components, we're looking at different opportunities for locating a new cultural arts center, whether it's refurbished in place or there's another location in and around the downtown. Other opportunities for a public library. We heard some feedback that a library downtown was something that would be certainly embraced. Of course, certainly the churches, wonderful churches in the downtown, and they should be embraced and included just based upon the wonderful support and community activities they bring to your downtown. Great civic components that is very unique to your downtown. And of course, CMS, Huntersville Elementary School, wonderful asset, great civic component, and certainly an anchor within your downtown. And of course, soul. You know, this is very important. I know we've had a lot of discussions about that, and it's really about, you know, enhancing, celebrating the existing neighborhoods, your existing civic and historic downtown buildings, all the open spaces and activities that happen within your downtown. That needs to be a key driver here in terms of maintaining that soul and enhancing it and leveraging it into the future here. And what that means is being respectful in terms of the scale, finding that appropriate scale of buildings, that appropriate grain of buildings, and it's something that we talked about. You know, initially we were considering, you know, buildings around 3 to 4, up to 5 to 6. I think we heard loud and clear, and again through discussions, that, you know, the 5 to 6 stories is probably not appropriate for the downtown. That it's really about a 3 to 4 story scale with some finer grain development patterns that take place along there. Parking strategies, again, to support that scale of development, needs to be very carefully done in order to preserve that soul. I'll pause here for any questions. If we don't answer all questions, I want to give us, you know, a few minutes to have some questions, but certainly we have some more discussion points we'd like to carry forward.
Just the question, will the printouts that we're doing now, are they matching up with this?
The printouts that you are receiving are that first master plan.
First.
Yes. These other plans, they're in the package, but I don't know if they're being printed out.
So there was 6, I think, maps that we were printing. And so it was the first page, I think, of this.
Yes.
And then the other.
The other pages are the vision plan.
Okay, and we're going to go over those vision plan. Okay.
So they are this or not?
So let me be clear. Could you go to the first slide?
Sure.
of this? And I apologize for getting this, but unfortunately, we didn't have the printouts of the maps that I had hoped. You will get this printout, the overall, and then further in the presentation, there's more detail of 5 other maps, and you're going to get those. Those are going to be much more detail than the broader things.
Are you, Jack?
The ones on the website.
Yes, they're on the website, but we wanted to give 11 by 17 handouts, hard copies to have, yes.
Tonight? Are you saying?
Tonight, yes, they're running right now.
Thank
So
you, Jeff.
yes, thank you, sorry. I
Okay,
started
does
in-
anybody have a question right now before we continue on with it?
I do. Can we see the current CIP road projects? That are, or is that coming?
Say that again.
Can we see the CIP road projects?
The list. You want to see the list?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can it be delivered to us?
Well, I don't know if
Bobby's
it's somewhere and I'm
fine.
not seeing it, or can we get it?
Oh, okay.
projects list that the town board adopted in June or July to June of this year. Once this plan is done, we expect that to change quite a bit. But the question was, what are the current road projects that you've got?
That would be called speed reading.
That just shows Bobby's been in it.
You gotta know how to work the website.
Y'all are pushing my flip phone real hard.
Yeah.
No, it's gonna be very speed reading. Jackie said don't overlook her.
So Elaine, do you have a question or are you
How are
going?
they ranking with this plan? Like the current ones proposed, how do they fit in with this plan? Does that make sense?
I think you said ranking, I think that's always a tricky word, because some of these move at different points in time, so it's tough to rank and say, we're gonna do this, and we'll move to the next one.
Right.
They're all running at somewhat floating, rotating schedules.
So there's a.
So this is our list of projects. The only projects that are funded are the projects in the current year. So we've adopted FY '23's budget. So everything you see in FY '23's cost estimate is a funded project. 24 through 27 are on here as a list of projects that we will consider when we get to that year. 24 will change next year when we start looking at it. 25 will be different than what it's listed here, and so on and so forth. If it says future, in the pages that follow here, anything you see in years 23 through 27 are funded in our 5-year CIP. If it's labeled in the future year, it's a project that we contemplate, but it is not funded in our 5-year CIP list.
How are they prioritized, Jackie?
How are they
Or
prioritized?
who does it too? Who prioritizes?
The town board adopts the budget every year, and so we don't say, we're gonna go out and first do Gilead Road West, and we're not gonna work on any project until we finish Gilead Road West and then move on to the second one. All of the ones in the current year are funded, and so generally speaking, our parks director would be charged with handling the parks projects, and engineering and public works would be charged with funding the transportation-related projects, so on and so forth. So it's not like we say this one is the absolute most important, and this one's the second most, and third, and 27th.
Will you relate, it's not all funded by the town of Huntsville. It depends on, go ahead. Explain
That's
that.
absolutely true. Main Street will, it says it's a $23 million project. A lot of that funding has come from CRTPO and the state got it from the federal government, and some of it Charlotte Water.
Are you looking for Gilead Road in particular?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's look.
Let's get specific.
21 Gilead Road mast arms. Where's Gilead Road at in here?
Gilead Road was the first
Gilead
one.
Road between post office and, yeah, the west.
Gilead Road, is it on the list? I don't remember Gilead Road being on the list.
Okay, so it's on NCDOT.
All right, so state where, the answer to his question.
Gilead Road West not being on the list does not necessarily mean the town. So the news that it had moved up in the state's funding, I suspect, came after we adopted the budget in June.
So that is a state-funded project.
That
and
is
it
a
no
state
money
project,
from
so
the-
it will,
only
as a
money from
general
the town of
rule-
Huntsville will be in the budget.
as a general rule, if we have no funding commitment to it, it's not going to appear on our CIP list.
Okay.
Lee, I think it's the Gilead Road West, it says prior years.
Yeah, that one I know, yeah.
That's
Yeah, that's,
several years back.
yeah, yeah. This chunk out here, this quarter mile right out here. Yeah, that's the one that's kind of the contention with us in NCDOT.
So is fiscal year 24 for Main Street, is that funded or not funded?
Not yet. It's not adopted.
It's not adopted.
We'll have to pay that, but the only money that's really planned to be spent is in FY '23.
Okay.
This all will change at some level next year
And that's inclusive of what DOT contributed?
for Main Street.
Yeah.
23 is. 23 is,
23, yeah.
the 23 million would be.
That's all that
Previous years.
Gotcha.
it has. Okay.
Does that answer your question?
It does, thanks.
Anybody
Bobby,
else have a question on that?
help me. This is a good document, and I like it a lot. It's out of date now, because we don't update our annual budget document. The board took action to fund some projects. Stephen, so we contemplate some different money on, isn't it Stumptown Road? We've taken action in the fall that makes this document out of date.
And none of these projects roll forward until a capital project order gets adopted, so it's a one-off each time.
So the out year ones are just kind of placeholders, somebody's idea, it's like I'm looking at,
For planning purposes, you can see like the sheets we have in here, talk about the different sources of funds that might come, operating impacts, helping us prepare for future bond referendums. So it sort of helps us think and talk strategically about the cost, the different funding sources, and then operating impacts.
I remember that from the budget meeting. Okay.
Thank you. Continue. On your side.
Just one more question on that. For this document, do you have the appropriated funds for resources, what percentage or what dollar amount for each one of the projects, where did it come from? How much was the city, or I'm sorry, the town, how much was?
We'll be glad to answer your question afterwards, but only the members of the committee should ask. Ask questions at this time. If you'll wait, we'll answer your question after the meeting.
I have one more quick question. So it's shown on the current map that there's a roundabout at Greenway where the North State Development comes out. But I know in the motion that passed the, for the project, there was no right turn on Greenway. So out of the new development. So I don't know how that would work with a roundabout. I don't know how specific we're getting about, those places.
The roundabout on Gilead,
On Greenway Drive.
on Greenway.
Watkins and Greenway.
Watkins and Greenway. So when they come out of the new development, they aren't supposed to be able to take a right onto Greenway. Yeah, and there's a roundabout shown there now, but I don't know how that would work to keep people from taking, how can you?
Okay,
That's in the motion.
Yeah, that didn't change their plans, this wouldn't.
All right, there, go ahead.
so there'll be a signage device to prohibit that movement, or?
It's just in the motion.
It's in the motion.
I have a question about the stormwater. On page 6, it references a regional stormwater strategy implementation. Where, do you have that, or that's being developed? Who's going to develop that?
We have a general strategy in terms of where the best locations would be based upon
You have, should Kelly have recommendations on that?
general recommendations, yes. And you'll see as we get into sort of the outline, as we establish the script, the framework, we're recommending some advanced studies to understand that from a more technical.
So this would be building on existing things?
Exactly.
Okay.
So again, just to sort of give you some insight, where we look for these larger facilities is certainly before they get into the water courses. And obviously in those areas, there's usually lower topography. Sometimes there's natural bowls that occur. So that becomes perfect opportunities to kind of catch and control the flow and the quantity of stormwater that comes from the downtown. So we look to those areas first, and obviously some areas are undeveloped, some areas are developed. So it might be an incremental sort of approach where the realities of current property ownership occur. That's the general intent, and that is integrated with other things that you would do in terms of streetscape and some of those green street opportunities we're talking about. So even at that level, we can begin to introduce some stormwater proactive activities.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question. So with all of these plans that would be submitted after we approve the final document per se, are you guys going to have an itemized document of zoning change recommendations to the board?
We're going to have listed a number of elements that should be considered that would help help sort of support the master plan that we're putting forward. So I think the documents you're looking at right now, if I'm not mistaken, these are the vision plans. So these are expressions, and we'll talk about this in a moment. They're almost like test fits within the master plan based upon certain catalytic projects. They're going to evolve over time based upon the realities of the market, realities of property ownership. We wanted to demonstrate logical and feasible growth patterns. But those elements that sort of allow that to happen, those will be part of the design guidelines that we hope will emerge through this, after this process and continue on, so that it becomes codified to allow for, you know, these patterns to occur.
Right, I'm just thinking from a development standpoint, right? So like, if somebody was to come in and develop a piece of property and it's not zoned mixed use right now, right? They would have to go in front of the board for a zoning change, correct? So I guess my concern is, and this is probably just the state of the situation, is that if we don't have an itemized, you know, set of recommendations that the board can look at, that they can maybe pre-approve those changes so that it can stimulate development for people to come in and go ahead and develop those pieces of property, or, you know, because it costs a lot of money for somebody to come in and do a zoning change. Just in attorney's fees alone, you're looking in the hundreds of thousands at times. So I guess that's something that it will be easily recognized for the board to consider.
It's spelled out in here, right? Page 6 kind of goes into that process, I think, about building types.
Yeah.
And all of that, yeah.
Okay, please hold your questions, further questions until we complete more of the presentation. Thank you.
So the urban guidelines, then, is that something that, Jack, you guys take up afterwards? Is that something you're supposed to weigh in on, or?
I could answer that. That's one of the recommendations that we're providing to this master planning process. There are some great guidelines that are in place. I think they're more global within the town of Huntersville.
Right.
And we would recommend that there's a downtown-focused set of guidelines as part of this process that is to codify a lot of things that we're talking about through this process here. We're not going to provide those guidelines. We're recommending that those guidelines be developed as part of this process.
Go ahead.
So again, we went through these underpinning layers that really establish the organizing principles that support the master plan. If there's anything that we're missing or should be changed, please let us know, because this is, again, this is that underpinning of the master plan. Of course, we focus on the quarter-mile area of the downtown master plan. And within that, we identified potential key catalytic projects and areas of focus. And as a general organizing method, we created two broad categories: economic development, and within that there's public and private. And then infrastructure, we're looking at transportation, all modes of transportation, and then open space. And you can see how they populate within and around the quarter-mile area of the downtown. Pretty equal distribution with the quadrants. But these are those projects that we feel can be catalytic for your downtown. Some of them, of course, are near-term, some of them are mid-term, and some of them are long-term. And as we get through this process here, we're going to begin to establish some implementation and some phasing strategies for each one of these. But we wanted to map these within the master plan here so we can have a discussion as to if they are appropriate, if they need to be added to, or how they might be organized differently.
Is that supposed to be map 1? I'm confused. I'm trying to.
I think we're going to get to the map you're looking at right now.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
So this is showing those catalytic projects on the master plan. Now, what we have, again, is a conceptual vision plan. This is that expression of the master plan. As we talked about before, this is where we look at, you know, an actual pattern of development that frames up each one of these catalytic projects. So you see this in a context, and that's important to see relative to what's on the ground now and how things might evolve in the future. So again, this plan has evolved through our conversations over the past several weeks, and we'll get into that relative to each of the quadrants here. So northwest quadrant, of course, there are a number of anchor elements that we're looking at. First and foremost, the town hall. And I know there's some meetings earlier this week where the town hall was being discussed in terms of shifting its location on the site, perhaps a bit to the south. This plan does not reflect that. That's something that we'll update as we get into this process here. But the key point is that that block is a very key catalytic block based upon the opportunities it has to foster other development and partnerships to perhaps integrate a parking structure and some development around it to really set off and anchor your downtown on this new public town square. We're showing, again, an evolution, an attitude about development as it might track to the north in terms of a smaller grain, finer grain housing typology. We're showing perhaps some new street locations, east-west, connecting Main Street with Old Statesville Road to, again, enhance and increase mobility. These would be multimodal streets. By multimodal, meaning for bicyclists, pedestrians, on-street parking. Again, we're trying to break down the scale of these blocks and make it much more walkable in this gathering core of your downtown core. Of course, you see Holbert Park and the opportunities for expansion. That's a key part of the expression that's in this plan here. And of course, the anchor with CMS, we're showing still the opportunity for locating a more urban prototype and what that might mean in terms of a presentation and an anchor within Holbert Park. As we talked about before, we're still showing the east-west connector dashed in. So it's not necessarily driving the plan, but it's something that will inform future decisions relative to the blocks and activities that happen around it. As we look at the northeast quadrant, of course, at the heart of this quadrant is the Mackle Mills neighborhood. And what are the opportunities to embrace and extend that scale and grain and pattern development appropriately along Watkins, or Walter Street rather, and some of the Green Street activities and improvements that could be considered for that armature. Again, thinking about an incremental pattern of development and growth as it transitions from Walter Street west towards North Church Street. Is there an opportunity to introduce different building types, residential building types, attached buildings, perhaps some small apartment buildings? But at the same time, preserving as much of the tree canopy in these larger blocks as possible, and let that drive the pattern of growth within those blocks, which could be a very unique opportunity to grow and nurture this existing urban neighborhood right in your downtown core. We talked about before, is there the opportunity to introduce different street types, different alleys to allow for folks to walk and travel and navigate through these blocks in an intentional way, which makes it much more inviting and again breaks down the scale and grain of these blocks. Preserving the opportunity for something catalytic there at the corner of Huntersville Concord Road and North Church Street. Talked about the opportunities there for perhaps something that's a little bit more intense in scale and activity. There might be some ground floor commercial activities. There might be an opportunity for an evolution of parking strategies. In a short term, certainly surface parking, but perhaps in a long term, if it's warranted, the block is big enough to accommodate a structured parking facility. And how does that begin to interact and unfold at that key corner there as it crosses the railroad corridor? We talked about different opportunities for circulation along Huntersville Concord Road, particularly that bend in the road, if you will, as it transitions from a south alignment toward the west. Is there an opportunity to do something very unique from a traffic calming standpoint, but also creating a wonderful gateway experience into the downtown core? Southwest quadrant, a couple of the key elements there, certainly. For the town hall, moving to the north side of Huntersville Concord Road, does that open the opportunity for the town to seek partnerships for the parcel of land that's adjacent to Discovery Place Kids? What are some of the programmatic opportunities associated with that? Is there an opportunity to integrate some civic components or other mixed-use opportunities? Of course, the Main Street mixed-use block, as we're calling it, that is the wonderful opportunity, and in many ways, this is part of the core of the soul of downtown Huntersville, the jewel of buildings there along Main Street. How can you leverage that and be respectful of that and grow that into a pattern that is very incremental and in keeping with your downtown core? The wonderful opportunity with Maxwell Avenue as that wonderful thread, and we talked about this before, of UNERF, a shared street experience. It's already happening now. How can you build upon that and control that and leverage that into something that's very unique within your downtown? You don't see this anywhere else along this corridor here. And how does that block evolve and grow incrementally as it should be appropriate for this particular location? Again, within this quadrant, you also see opportunities to the south where you can look at some appropriate sensitive infill development that might take place over time. Again, a lot of larger lots there, and as, again, warranted by property owners and their decisions and desires to really grow and explore some of these unique building types that we've talked about before, accessory dwelling units, or some small carriage house or cottage housing types. Again, to introduce interesting new housing typologies within your downtown core to provide a range of diverse offerings. In the southeast quadrant, this is a very interesting quadrant for us. Certainly one of the key elements of this is the South Church Street extension. We see this as an armature to allow for a lot of great things to happen. It can become this great multimodal street that, again, embraces a lot of green solutions. Is there an opportunity to create a parallel Greenway Park that gives you this great linear green space that runs parallel to Church Street and taps into the existing greenway that connects into the Vermilion neighborhood and points beyond? Is there an opportunity, again, this is something, more of a long-term strategy, to look at discussions with the White Hill Senior Apartments and the Hunter Village Assisted Living Facility? Are there some partners that could be working together with them to look at perhaps relocating in place, which would allow for a more diverse and purposeful integration within the downtown? Again, these are some longer-term opportunities, but we wanted to show how this South Church Street extension perhaps set up that pattern for that to occur. Again, a wonderful opportunity for an incremental implementation of stormwater facilities on a regional level. You see south of that North Church Street extension, a more linear stormwater facility, and perhaps if that Hunter Village property was, even if it was a redesign and rebuild on site, there's an opportunity to create another stormwater facility there. Again, both at the headwaters of this larger greenway system. The opportunity for this particular quadrant to tap into the Seam Trail is pretty tremendous, and just those touch points along South Church Street allow for you to have those connections there. To the south, you see that enclave there. We see that as a wonderful opportunity to have an extension of the neighborhoods of the existing neighborhoods around there. Pottstown, this becomes a gateway and an invitation into the downtown area, as well as Vermilion neighborhood to the east there. So again, we see that as something perhaps that could happen in the shorter term versus some of the things that are happening with the existing development along Huntersville Concord, perhaps evolving over time as development warrants. I'll pause there for any questions. Yes, sir.
The Gibson Park, my understanding is it's not gonna be built that way. That's the way I wanted it to be built. My understanding is the trees are all coming down and it's just gonna be widened.
Our recommendation would be to save those trees if at all possible. The intent with this plan was to show that as almost like a boulevard, keep the trees in place, and then where the existing roadway is, that's one roadway, and then split another road around that, so you can keep and preserve that as this wonderful green shard there, and then justify to the side of one side or the other of that new roadway, you could have a legitimate park.
I agree with you.
Okay.
I think we crossed the Rubicon there.
Okay.
That's, you know, it would be great if they would reconsider that.
That would be one of our recommendations, perhaps, and it's,
How can you widen it and save the trees?
They're not, you can't. That's what I say. They're talking about another lane.
One way.
One way.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
So you go into Charles and Lipp's property
right.
as you go out. Okay.
Have they already started the process of buying land?
That's my point. Nice idea. I don't think it's gonna work.
Will there be sidewalks on that?
yes, ma'am. The notion being is Gibson Park Drive, we should have Gibson Park. Perhaps that could be a gateway park.
That'll help me out, getting up the street, without getting killed.
I think it's already gonna be just wide.
And not have sidewalk.
Probably sidewalk on one side
Yeah,
would be my guess.
sidewalk on one side, yeah.
I got a question. Sorry, sir. So when I look at this particular chart, the boundary area, and it happens to have, I guess, building types, designations laid out and all that good stuff. And I map that to what we've got planned. I see something that looks like it might feed into the design guidelines to say that, for instance, residential building type, multifamily apartments is fine here, 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 and here. And it's got it all blocked off and like we're gonna do our ordinances according to this as far as making the building types fit on these blocks. And then, but the result we expect is something that looks like this, where it's the scale of these things that may still be multifamily apartments, but they're no more the size of a single family home. Looks great to us here. That may not be the end result because now we've changed the building guidelines to allow. So can you address that for me?
Sure, and you'll see that it's woven into, the script, the outlines there. One of the things that we recommend is, particularly with the apartment building type, it's a pretty broad category. It's anything over 3 units, and then all the way up to, 200 units. We suggest perhaps a finer grain or smaller, segmentation of the categories. Maybe it's from 3 to 15 units, or and then 15 or 16 to 20 units, and then so on and so forth. That is more in keeping with the existing lot structure and geometries within your downtown core, which is reflected in the patterns that you're seeing in that vision plan.
Right.
So that plan represents the attitude for some smaller incremental apartment type buildings that do look like, a duplex or a quadruplex, something of that scale, but still classified as an apartment building just by the nature of the current definition. So one of our recommendations is to, through the urban design guidelines, is perhaps identify those categories to allow for, those smaller incremental building types to occur.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
Any other questions at this time?
I have a question. So at some point, there was talk about with the new North State development on Gilead, there'd have to be a right turn lane to come into it, and I wondered what the status of that is.
So the question, the North State project, initially, the side road that goes into the parking deck next to DPK, DOT initially, when they reviewed the plan, said, we need you to put a deceleration lane on Gilead, or they call it a right turn lane, so that the cars can get out of the way of the cars getting to the intersection. And the town on it took multiple requests from DOT not to do that, not to give up big sidewalk in favor of a turn lane so cars can move quicker through downtown, and DOT agreed.
Okay,
So there will not be that right turn lane.
okay, good, thank you.
So as we pull these graphics together, these plans, we're scripting the final strategy. And this is that preliminary working outline. I think you all have a copy. And this is really where we get into outlining those key recommendations. And those key recommendations, you know, also include supporting plans and guidelines that we're recommending to address and focus efforts on as we get beyond this master plan process here. So again, all these recommendations, they've been building over the course of this process here. And they include a lot of the discussions that we've had, you know, together with you, feedback we've received from the community, from staff. And I know there's a lot to digest there, and I would please take a look at that and see if there's anything that we're missing or perhaps need to augment as we finalize the strategy. But those recommendations are organized according to infrastructure, land use and urban design, and economic development. So it's pretty logical in terms of that focus there, but there's some nuance in there that I would certainly encourage you to take a look at. We've also listed those development focus areas and potential catalytic projects. Again, economic development, public and private, and then infrastructure development, transportation and open space. Our next effort here is really going to be to look at implementation phasing strategies for those projects. As we talked about before, some of those are near term on a short-term horizon. Others are longer term and have different implementation and phasing aspects to them. So I just want you to be aware that as part of this final strategy, we're going to begin to outline those phasing implementation strategies. And of course, the next steps beyond this process. And I'll open it up for any additional questions on that. I know there's a lot of narrative there to look through.
One question, I'm sure it's probably mentioned, but I can't see it. Did you guys make a recommendation on building height or number of stories?
Yes, it's not in the narrative here, but it's in the master plan.
Okay.
We, if you look, and it's hard to tell on that graphic so
That's what I
small.
was trying to figure out.
That's a great point. We can make that a little bit more clear. But there's little bullets on there on each one of those block types that has like a 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 or 3 to 4. And that
It's basically no change. Correct. Yeah, 48.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I see.
I don't know if it's working for me.
Yeah.
So what, well, see where I'm putting that circle at? That little number right there, it'll tell you the number of stories, 3 to 4 stories.
They can see that.
And what we did for each one of those block types is we indicated a range of building heights. You'll see it starts in terms of the scale. The highest scale in terms of height is in that downtown core, that 4 to 6 block area. We're looking at 3 to 4 stories. Again, one thing that's not evident in these sort of bubble block types is the grain that we envision. By grain, I mean it's not going to be essentially one extruded block frontage. You'll have, you know, some modulation of those block fronts, so it won't be one big building face. It's something that has some articulation across that front. But with that, you could see 3 to 4 building story heights coming along the street edge.
So were you just doing that on the basis of what is code currently? Or were you guys thinking that, the reason I bring this up is because what Cornelius is doing right now. and what their plans are and the development that they've been able to bring in by changing that zoning regulation. So would it be something that you recommend as a change? Because obviously, square footage in this area is, there's not a lot left, right? So if we want density and we're competing with other municipalities, I would think that that would be something that we might want to consider.
Sean, the overwhelming results in public comment were they did not like the scale.
They did not like this.
No, there was overwhelmingly.
And Cornelius,
We started-
they knocked that thing down to 4 stories. They didn't want it bigger than the Kane Center, so that was,
We looked initially,
It just went back
yeah,
on it.
they backed.
we looked initially, at perhaps, exceeding that 4-story height around the town square, because we had a larger space, and perhaps that would give you more enclosure, and perhaps give some relief, so you're not overwhelmed with additional building height. But as was mentioned through conversation, it seemed like that 5 to 6 story building height was not appropriate for the downtown. So we elected to say, okay, let's keep that at a 3 to 4 story height, which could give you this, certainly a wonderful downtown core, if you think about that as a uniform height. And the syncopation that you could have with a 3 to 4 undulation, and then paying attention, again, we get into urban design guidelines, how the grain of those blocks look. So it isn't one monolithic frontage, it's something that has some articulation across the front there. But those are the guidelines that have to be put in place, to your point, so you can achieve those results.
Right.
The current regulation doesn't include 3 to 4 stories in some of the places that you're talking about right
Correct,
now.
yeah.
So it's suggested and it's recommended, and public comment appears to support that. But there still would have to be some type of a change in the current ordinances to see that come to fruition.
Yeah,
And to
some
see
of these areas.
the
that are-
attraction of the economic stimulus you're talking
Correct,
about.
yeah.
Any other questions?
Another question. So I may have missed it in here, but is there anything about like improving lighting and signage downtown? I know there's sidewalk improvement addressed, but, and uniform, signs around town and,
Infrastructure.
yeah, infrastructure.
I believe we got that in the narrative here,
Okay.
but I will make a note to make sure that it is included.
Okay.
Okay, so, Larry was interested in, hearing some of the, for your comments. And I think you've been asking questions and all, so I'm gonna give Larry a chance to bring up a subject he would like to know more about, if he's so inclined.
Sure, absolutely.
Madam Chair, can I just ask?
Related to this project,
Absolutely, yes.
Jane would, wants to go
I
first.
think that I'm right, I'm gonna ask Amy Holman, because I think she knows this to be, if this is correct, but the Arts and Cultural Center, I think if we vacate that building, actually, then that reverts back to the library, the county.
It
So
does,
that's
okay.
information I think that might be helpful to you.
And is there a deed restriction on Holbrook Park? Did we find out the Holbrooks specified that if the,
The old school, I was always told.
yeah, I know that,
The old school building.
the ag school, but I think the Holbrooks, when they voted in the land for the park, I don't know if they meant to put a road through it or not, but
It wasn't the same Holbrooks. I don't think it was the
so
same
this
Holbrooks.
might be something to check into before we, hitch our wagon to the, and since we're on the topic of East West Road. I appreciate you putting my contingent plan in there, our contingent plan, but I think it's flipped and a little bit, because I don't think segment B is necessary unless you get the railroad crossing. I think segment B between Sherwood and Old Statesville, all you're gonna do is send that traffic out onto Old Statesville to turn right, to go down to Huntersville Concord and turn left. And that doesn't get us anything, so it's not what we're tearing up a park for and a $500,000 greenway, so.
Let me ask you this, could C happen independently of B?
Yes, definitely.
Is
And
it-
C needs to happen before B. Yeah.
So where are
you-
y'all in, excuse me, just a minute, what page? are you
Page
on?
three,
Page 3, item what?
segment A, B, and C.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. So my question was on, and Larry answered it, segment B is unnecessary unless you get the rail crossing that's specified in segment C.
So in terms of that incremental pattern, it could be that segment C that happens between Main Street and Old Statesville Road prior to that segment B through Holbrook
Yeah,
Park.
yeah. Because that,
Give you more connectivity in your downtown core. Because again, that's what we're certainly trying to achieve, between Main Street and Old Statesville Road, different east-west pathways, different street connections along that corridor there.
and and we're getting one with Holbrook Street being extended out of the whole states. And while we're on the east-west thing, is that, has anybody else heard the talk about swapping out the railroad crossing at Delwood for Gibson Park? As far as which one stays and which one goes, I mean, that's kind of critical of this too. So.
My understanding is Delwood's gone.
Really?
No. Huh?
Just thought I'd throw that out there. Just to rub a little
I'll say
salt.
Delwood and Gibson Park.
No, it's it.
One or the other.
One or the other.
One or the other.
Well, why are we spending a fortune on Gibson Park if you're
Ding,
gonna
ding, ding,
keep
ding.
Delwood?
Well, yeah, there's that federal money too, that we could go underneath and create a pedestrian crossing as well at a certain point.
And
Because-
that's the way that transportation's going anyway,
Yeah,
not to cross over, but to go in.
go under.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a huge, I think I sent that article out to you guys about the amount of federal funding that's there for that. It's pretty exponential. So that would be something I think we could look at is going underneath instead of over.
Would that stop there being an extra closure that we would need?
I don't know.
Norfolk Southern probably doesn't play that.
I don't know.
And while we're digging holes in the ground, sorry.
Well, let's bring the conversation in so everybody's hearing you. So speak a little louder.
So the reference to Elon Musk's boring company, does that have to be in there? If you read the article in the Wall Street Journal 4 days ago, it turns out that's a big ruse anyway. He's not answering calls. He only had one successful one. It was in Las Vegas from the Strip to the Convention Center, and it was less than a mile, I think, and it takes 3 passengers at a time in a Tesla in this hole in the ground. And that's it. And everybody else, you can return the calls for Chicago, for Miami, anybody more. So if we can take the branding out at least and just, I don't want somebody to pick this thing up in 15 years and look at us and say, boy.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I want to go back to what you're talking about, the railroad crossings at Gibson Park and Delwood. Was there a city commissioner that said Delwood might stay open and Gibson Park closed?
And I guess to that, and I apologize, I was in another conversation. There was a request from the community to consider closing another crossing other than Delwood. And so we've at least lifted it up to the railroad to see if they'll consider that. It may be the Gibson Park crossing. It's hard to look in between and see. They're going to close a number of private crossings as well as public crossings as a result of the Stumptown project. So as of right now, we're waiting to hear from the railroad.
But someone somewhere is suggesting that Gibson Park be closed after we've just spent a fortune between Main Street and 115. And we're getting ready to spend a fortune on the other side of Main Street.
Well, the issue was brought up that out of all of the closures that are being suggested, it seems like the only way to close off connection is in Pottstown. So it was either one street or another, and through the Vermillion-Pottstown connection, Delwood is kind of it's becoming more of a viable intersection there. And so with all of the different crossings that there are on the railroads, it just seemed to come up as if, why did they have to be right here where we're already having so much other infrastructure changes? Why did either of them or both of the choices have to be in the middle of Pottstown? So Gibson Park was another suggestion that could possibly make it work.
When the Delwood, Church Street's extended to Holbrook's, then everybody could go down to the main entrance, which is at grade, The Delwood, I know, we get a truck stuck there about every
It was,
month or two.
yeah, there was a discussion at the grading end, or it would have to be level. the
If
grade would
Delwood
have to
did
be-
get left open, there would definitely have to be upgrades and improvements to make it function better than it does
That's what
today.
I'm saying. If
Yeah.
you connect Church Street, which is on the CIP, then.
And we're not saying that it's gonna be Delwood instead of Gibson Park or vice versa. It's just something that we're researching further at this point.
All I'm saying is, as a former owner of tractor trailers, and every time I see a truck stuck there, I consider what it costs, traffic-wise and everything else. Delwood in and of itself doesn't bother me, it's what Delwood is, as far as the grade, and your, whatever it is, 600 yards south of Gibson Park, that, no telling which different pockets we dug in to expand Gibson Park back to 115 and back into Vermillion, and getting, and in the process of doing that more, not counting what Charlotte Water is getting ready to do on Gibson Park. I don't have any problem with Delwood being open, I have a problem with the way it sits structurally, and what it would take to bring that grade up, and whose property's got to be involved. Personally, it would help me, but but we've already done all this work on Gibson Park, that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I've asked 30 years ago, why can't we go back by the Presbyterian Church Cemetery and include that all the way back down to Holbrook like it probably was 100 years ago, if that is Holbrook down there. It just, all I'm saying is that to spend all this money on infrastructure around Gibson Park and to talk about closing it seems almost as absurd as what Nate was talking about a few minutes ago about what's being done on the other side of Gibson Park, and we want to save trees, but some of us know that those trees have already in the process of being bought by the government to take down. It's sort of an oxymoron to me. Oh, that's right, we are talking about trees.
Any other comments? Larry?
I'd like to open up a discussion about Maxwell Avenue. I'd love to hear people's thoughts about that as an opportunity that's very unique within your downtown. One of the first things I did when we started this project, we took a walk down Maxwell, and I could see, it was just an incredible sort of hidden experience.
Are you talking about North Maxwell or South Maxwell?
South Maxwell.
Thank you, because the South Maxwell doesn't exist on the map. It's North Maxwell and nothing else.
Understood.
Get UPS and I'll tell you.
But what does everybody think about, embracing that and leveraging that as something, as a unique thread within your downtown?
I think it's great. Brick pavers, redo it, brick pavers would be great. You could look
Where you gonna park trucks? Y'all laugh. Where you gonna park trucks?
I think that's part of the magic and opportunity, because it's a true functioning street where you can begin to designate certain areas for temporary loading. I think there's just an incredible opportunity to integrate that in a way that accommodates the functional realities of what's typically a back of house condition into something that's more
Yeah, you gotta be
pedestrian friendly.
careful of it, because
I understand.
I'm right there.
Yes.
And the problem that you might have is that now that we have limited parking on Main Street,
No
right?
parking on Main
No
Street.
parking on
Thank
Main
you.
Street. So we have cars that are routed back on Maxwell.
There's
to-
17 spots now.
Yes.
Well,
That's on South
South
Maxwell. There's no parking in front of the old buildings.
yeah, those all disappeared. But essentially what happened is that you go down Maxwell to get to that parking lot to access the shops on Main Street and other businesses in the area. So it can get highly trafficked, and essentially what I've been noticing is that people are parking on the sides of each of the road and then blocking Maxwell, and it becomes kind of a cluster. So I know there's ways that we can combat that, and it'll get better as traffic flow is used to the new Main Street, but it's something to consider because it's not a very wide street. It's an alley,
Right.
basically, and that alley is bringing in traffic for businesses and people to park.
The opportunity I see there, it's a town street, correct?
Right.
So you can control your destiny there. And you can do these creative things to allow it to function the way it needs to, based upon your, on-the-spot knowledge, and enhance it in a way that will make it this wonderful, experience for your community and for visitors who come downtown.
Sean, you getting more traffic through the back door now than the front?
We were, I mean, we were getting all of our traffic to the back door because the front was closed.
Right, but now that it's opened up, is it?
I don't know, to be honest with you, I've been away for the last couple weeks, so I just came back and from what I can see, people are still used to using the back door, not the front, because nobody's
Well,
using.
for me, it was whichever side of that parking lot I parked on, I would go down that
Yeah,
street or that.
yeah, it's great that we have access in the back, right? Because it gives us two points of egress. And a lot of those businesses have 2 points of egress, which is awesome. And we, hopefully, as that develops more, you can use Maxwell as a point of egress, and you can also use Main Street as a point of egress. So I think that it's a great idea. We have to have the infrastructure in place to develop the rest of Main Street and that area, because right now, I don't think you're gonna it's gonna be tight with the parking situation and just the traffic being rerouted through Maxwell at times, whether that's construction related or otherwise.
Right.
So it's just gotta be carefully thought out, that's all. I know I don't know that they call it in Europe, somebody's got the name, where they put the posts in the ground, where they can lift the post during peak hours of traffic and shut down the street. What is that called? Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce that, but that seems more feasible to me, especially for events and things like that.
Are there regular events that take place within that street?
We
or
do
spill out from?
events. We're doing an event right now, so literally as we speak. So we do events, and there's a lot of people that come in each point of egress. I think the tavern does events, sporting and stuff like that. But
So it's interesting, I mean, that's, it seems like a key space for having these regularly occurring events versus these grand things that happen on a more seasonal level. So I think having that ability to have these small intimate gatherings that are, part of your day-to-day activities, and then having these greater park spaces for larger events.
yeah.
That almost sounds like, I've seen it in Mooresville where the Main Street, and part of Mooresville, they blocked it off and it was almost like a block party.
Yeah.
2 blocks of Main Street, but it also had the ordinances too, where if you had a band at one end, that you could actually walk around with alcohol, and that's a whole nother, like, changing lots of things, but when you talk about.
Social district, yes.
But that sounds kind of what you're alluding to,
Yes.
yes.
I do think that when, that whoever's looking at closing whatever crossings you have south of here, from Huntersville Concord Road south down to Holbrook, that they should also consider, can a funeral held at the Presbyterian Church get the back go? Do they have to come back out to Old Statesville Road to get to the cemetery down at Hilton? In other words, are they going to have to travel several mile or more down 115 to get across and to get over to the cemetery on Delwood and Church or Main, whatever you call it?
Well, if they keep Gibson open, then.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
If they keep Gibson open, then they could just, it's not too far from each other. Yeah, they'll
So
cross.
Gibson is, so.
Yeah.
If Gibson's open.
Yeah.
Is it extremely cost prohibitive to lower, instead of building, going under, just to lower that overpass?
Can't change the railroad track.
There's no way
It's on
to do
grade, it's
that,
gonna stay there, yeah.
because it's level here.
If they close Gibson, how will all the people from Vermillion walk downtown? I guess they'll have to go
That is,
down.
because it won't be a pedestrian crossing either, so you're choking off the whole side
A
of,
whole side of
quadrant. Doesn't
huge
have an exit.
Vermillion,
Yeah.
Hey, I've had trouble getting out for 2 years.
Yeah.
You never know which way it's going.
Okay, any other comments?
I have a question. So the east-west connector, if that happens, at Second Street, what other, if we open one, we have to close another one, right?
Two.
So is there something in the plan about which one would have to close?
Well, I think that's what Bobby said before, that it's under, I mean, some of that is
No,
contingent
I'm
on.
talking about
On
the
the-
east-west connector at Church
You're
Street.
talking on the north side.
Yeah, on the north side, not the south
That
side.
should go under. The grade is,
The grace is
that,
like going
that's where
on,
it should
yeah.
go under.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't have to close two other railroads? I don't know the rules.
I don't think so.
I don't
But
think so.
we should go under there.
Yeah.
And seek the federal
Under
money.
probably counts for one.
Right,
but
no,
no.
And the federal funding is literally up to draft.
You're saying go under at Church Street?
Yes,
Yeah,
it
okay.
was it second or?
Seconds.
Yeah,
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 second.
Second Street, sorry.
I got one more for Larry's question. So, do you ever see a point, this is Sean and Charles too, that with the intersection of Main and Huntsville Concord lighted, traffic lighted, a point where Maxwell would be closed off in Huntsville Concord? Is that, I mean, delivery trucks, you're going to choke that section off. That's one way to get it more pedestrian friendly, I guess. And I don't know how you manage that intersection after all this infrastructure gets put in here and those lights are in here too. So
What's the plan for Greenway? Is it to be widened?
I didn't get my question answered.
The other end of Maxwell.
And we would recommend that,
sorry.
you know, looking at some improvements there that would include perhaps widening it to allow for some
Well,
on-street
it goes
parking.
with that, if you close that intersection,
Yeah.
got it, that's the other way up that street, but right now Greenway you can't make that turn. I mean, it's a.
Right. Yeah, that
Tractor
that one's
trailers
tough.
make that turn, just watch them.
Yeah. If you got it,
They
you
don't
got
have a
it.
choice. They're sent there by their stupid GPSs, and they stop me and say, how do I get the hell out of here? And if you don't think truck drivers don't know that word, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Number two, you asked earlier about the back entrances to those buildings, and all due respect to Sean, in 12 minutes today, I counted 9 cars that pulled in my parking lot and walked into his building, and that's all well and good right now.
You tell them.
No, I didn't say nothing to them, I don't have to, they can't read. That's why when y'all talk about signage, I laugh. People don't read speed limit signs now, including our staff. And I can prove that. So 12 cars inside of 9 minutes parked today, walked into Sean's business, and I was glad for him for that. But when the rest of Main Street is developed, that parking is private. 20 cars were parked in the back of that parking lot at 2 minutes till 7 this evening. That's why I walked in at 1 till. That's not the only why I walked in at 1 till. And those cars have nothing to do with my buildings, because they're closed. There's nobody in the metal building over there this evening.
How about the gate? That's the cars usually, but just
The gate won't stop trucks. Trucks have got to come in there for deliveries, and the
yeah,
empty
you're
dumpster.
talking about road markers.
Charles is right. I mean, you can't really close that street
Can't
down.
choke that off. Okay.
You can't do it. The reason too is because we don't have parking in front of Main Street anymore. You couldn't have a delivery
Can't
truck
turn around.
stand.
Yeah.
It would block the whole Main Street road, and then it would create kind of chaotic traffic, like a Cisco delivery coming in or something like that, right? Like it would just throw everything off, and I don't think it would be feasible at all, and it would probably wreak chaos.
But I don't think that you
Isn't there
said,
17 spaces, new spaces on front on Main Street?
They're further down.
They're further
They're
down.
further down, they're not in front of the building.
They started the T
Yeah,
and
but you can't get a delivery truck on those if they're full.
I'm talking about just regular customers, not delivery trucks.
but you need all of it for business. You
We,
need
yeah,
delivery
we're talking
truck
about for like
business.
deliveries for business particularly. So like before, you can have somebody pull in front, like a delivery truck, and then be able to bring your goods, your FedEx or whatever, Amazon, into the building if there was space out front. The problem is now that we've gone down in the number of spaces, those spaces up front are always filled, right? So the only way that we can get stuff delivered is through the back on
They
Maxwell.
always deliver through the back, because I use Maxwell
Not
daily,
always.
multiple times, and delivery trucks have always used the back.
They used to
Forgive
use
me,
the
that's
front.
not true.
I saw it with my.
I will watch the trucks and take my flip phone and prove you wrong. Totally, they were out front today.
Yeah,
But again, going back to your original topic of conversation, our discussion point, I don't think it was to necessarily shut down Maxwell. It was to consider a unique approach to Maxwell.
Absolutely.
Where it might be shut down at certain times for festivals or for certain economic stimulus type of events for the businesses and for the people that live there. But you would still have foot traffic, bicycles, regular traffic. You might have something that slows it down. And the European thing that pops up, that does shut it down completely at certain times. But I would imagine that would not be during times of normal delivery. I know in my business, I'm not accepting deliveries 5 p.m. on a Friday night if I can avoid it, right? So, but with that, but that's really what you were
Absolutely, yes.
approaching it
Yeah,
as,
yes.
correct? Not shutting down Maxwell, but considering a different approach and use
And
of
a
it.
more intentional approach that accommodates all these key aspects.
And more aesthetic too,
And more
because it
aesthetic.
sounds like when you're
And-
making cobblestones or
Because a wonderful
whatever
thing you have is, you've got that really sort of commercial feel on the north part. And as you track south, it has more of a residential. You've got those great, wonderful historic homes. And to have that experience along that block, it's just incredible. And how can you enhance and protect and preserve that? That's something that's very unique within your downtown, that a lot of other downtowns don't have. I mean, you've got a unique street pattern, leverage that, and expand upon it. And Jack shared something with me.
Do something creative on Maxwell. I'm just saying we gotta deal with the trucks in the park.
Absolutely, it's a reality.
There ain't no trees left.
It's a reality, and I think that's the magic of the street, that it can function based upon reality, but still be something that's very unique and inviting for pedestrians. Something that Jack mentioned as perhaps a recommendation for this particular block, there perhaps is a charrette that should take place together with landowners to talk about these crucial elements, and come up with a plan for how to address it from an infrastructure standpoint and from an incremental development standpoint. If that's a recommendation that you agree with, we can include that within our narrative.
We've seen the Hamburg, presentation that, Mr. Seminole sent us all about the roundabout at Gilead. I mean, I'd like to discuss it, I mean, because it was kind of new ideas. And I know it didn't seem like it would be the same, with, like, we could get all of those, different gradients and all of that into what was in the actual Hamburg, presentation that he sent, but is it still something that could be viable for Gilead? It seems like it would be.
In all states, yeah.
Gilead and Old Statesville, 115?
I understand the width of that roundabout was somewhere in the order of 120, 150 feet.
I did not have the width. To be frank with you, that was provided because there was a question about could trucks travel around it? And so what that did was, if you look at it, you will see it's a huge, absolutely huge apron. In the interior of it is a fairly small spot. Contrast that with our new roundabout to the south. It's a big grass strip.
It's a big strip,
So
right.
imagine if it was constructed more, but it had different materials, so people weren't driving on it, but the truckers could utilize it to mountable curbing. That's what that was intended to do. It'll be extremely difficult to get a roundabout here without impacting
The business.
one of these quadrants in a huge way. And so it does not seem, in a very slight chance that might could occur. But I was just trying to represent that trucks could get around these things, but we are still talking about that.
It's just, it's not really feasible.
Frankly, right now, I say it's not feasible, but it doesn't mean that we aren't still trying to see if there's a way feasible.
In that example, I mean, it's a good pure geometry. Obviously, it's a circle. We can share examples where it's somewhat irregular in shape. oblong abouts. And it's, you know, again, based upon the geometry and constraints of the intersection. It might be a, you know, somewhat of a hybrid circle that might be more feasible at that location. But again, as Jack points out, there's a lot of constraints that perhaps limit that possibility. But our understanding is that they are exploring it with some roundabout experts.
It's still an
You
exploration.
took all the cash and you took
So,
the front end off.
The question, on this current map, you're showing a new stoplight at Sherwood and Gilead. But if you look down at Hillcrest, there's a potential new road that, you know, crosses over Gilead on Hillcrest. It's almost impossible to get out, from Hillcrest onto Gilead, particularly making a left turn as it is now. So I don't know if it would be feasible to do, another traffic light, a roundabout, something right there, because if you put a new traffic light at Sherwood, I foresee that would only back it up more and make it almost impossible to get out from Hillcrest. It's bad now.
It's too close to Old Statesville. Yeah, Hillcrest will get you something. You back it off another 100
Wasn't
feet.
there a plan that actually showed Sherwood being closed off?
Yeah, that's the CMS plan.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, I knew I'd seen it somewhere.
When east-west comes in, Sherwood gets closed off, and then Hillcrest becomes the Sherwood HES.
And the other thing, I know the DOT plan for Gilead, at least as it stood before they went into this next phase of design, was to have a roundabout there. So again, I think those are,
what about the DOT plan for the widening of Gilead?
Yes.
Are we surrendering that DOT control of that, like we talked
I
about?
have it on there.
I don't think the committee has, you know, come to a consensus other than, you know, Gilead Road should not be widened. And I think that's, you know,
They give us those 4 options, remember, to punt or get another traffic study or a couple others, but I don't, rubber meets the road in the next budget meeting, I guess, we can see if it's still on our CIP and then where that fits.
Because we would have to forfeit that funding, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Amber just noticed the two maps don't match. So on this one, there is not anything at Hillcrest.
What are you talking about?
Okay, on this set of maps, there's no roundabout or stoplight at Hillcrest, but there is on Sherwood. But on this one, it's the opposite. So there's a stoplight at Hillcrest, but not one at Sherwood.
And on this one, it's
So
not
page
on
one on this
Sherwood.
has
Yeah.
And not on Hill.
Sherwood, but not Hillcrest.
That's true.
All right. Any other? So we have 30 more minutes.
There'll be like a revision sent to us.
So, yeah, so where is it supposed to be?
Yeah.
Where are we at?
The light would be
What's the first map? Has it? I'm sorry. What's the label? BMP 1.1?
The
This
north-
is on Hill.
It's the
This
first
one
one.
has a stoplight at Hillcrest, but not at Sherwood, and then this quadrant one has it the opposite.
So if you
Page
read,
one.
yeah, if you go DMP 1.1, does not reconcile with CVP.
Yeah, there you
thank you for
1.1.
pointing
But
that
I would
out.
imagine
We'll
that
update that.
there'll be a follow-up and you'll let us
Yeah.
know which one is the correct way to go,
Who gets the stop?
So when we,
right?
Right.
Oh, I guess it's at the imaginary streets. It's an imaginary line.
Imaginary street.
Yeah.
Use your vision.
Right?
She's right. There's no way to get out of here.
Love that.
There's not lights there.
So you can't get out
No
of
way.
Hillcrest.
It's okay, that's just proof positive, we're all human.
Yeah.
So any other comments on this? You want us to email Jack or whatever before we get back together? Are we good? If we got any other comments, once we digest this,
I'm sorry, I missed your question.
once we digest the draft master plan outline, you want our comments
Yes,
emailed
please.
to you?
Yes.
Okay.
Please, thank you. Yes, so any comments you have, please email me your comments on the,
Okay.
I would like to hear, the committee, if you would consider sending your comments, Jack, concerning, recommending that we have an overall traffic plan for, the downtown, but extending it out to where, even down to, Bear Hop and maybe 73, so that we show where you can have the access back and forth to east and west, and have to. And the another one I would like to hear is I would like to see us if we give that have a library, at least a library in the downtown area where you can not necessarily to where they would have a lot of books, but where you could receive your requested books and return books in the care of the library.
Maybe it
So-
could be like a children's library or up to a certain age, and then you request the other ones or something. You could have a children's library.
Well, we might have more adults if we have children.
Well, a lot of children come to the Discovery Place, and,
I
but
know
I mean,
where-
they can request the books too. Adults can wait a little bit easier than children, but some of them.
Sarah, how does funding happen for the library? Is it Mecklenburg County or is it the town?
There's a library system governed under the auspice of the Mecklenburg County. So, do we have more presentation?
Address one. Yes, so I will just say, in getting to your comment, one of my comments are, I would like this plan to have a further out illustration of the transportation system to represent, there's Fairhoff, yes, there's Mount Holly, Huntersville, there's, so, yes, I am going to be asking for this plan to have that illustration to show the traffic system that's not just right here, because this is just one little piece of an entire system. I know your request was for a specific traffic study, but I was going to ask is if we show the system of a larger geography to show folks can go east-west, there's other alternatives than just Gilead Road, Huntersville Concord Road. Is that what you were getting at?
I meant like a plan, not just a traffic study. I didn't mean a traffic study.
Okay.
But I mean, where are our roads and how can we better direct
Yeah.
traffic to them? For example, you use Fairhoff.
Yeah.
Fairhoff can be extended out to Asbury Chapel Road.
Yes, it's
Through the
planned.
park.
That's correct.
And
In Stumptown as well is a
you know,
big deal.
the three towns own the Commerce Park down there. They could fund that out of the park.
3 towns?
All three towns on the Commerce Park.
Commerce.
Industrial Park, it's not just Tom.
And Mecklenburg County, yeah.
When you say 3 towns, you're talking Davidson, Cornelius.
I cannot hear what you're saying.
Davidson, Cornelius, and Huntersville?
The Commerce Business Park together on a joint venture with Mecklenburg County,
Oh, thank you.
and they govern it.
So just so we're clear, we actually are doing that plan. So Heather, who is our transportation planner, got word a week ago or 2 weeks ago that our mobility plan that we put for state money got approved. So we actually are doing that, so yes.
Fairhoff connection is coming.
Oh, it's the entire 63 square miles and all of those important east-west, north-south road connections are going to be looked at, yes.
I think as soon as that, the Church Street South is done, there's gonna be a lot of people turning that way. Church Street will have, because there's a lot more traffic now with Main Street closed. I've noticed there's a lot more traffic on Church. And, I think once that's finished, that'll divert a lot of people to the bottom side instead of going through town, so.
Yeah, I think it was unfortunate that the questions about transportation all came when we had so many critical roads being constructed or closed. You know. All right, so I contend that we combined 7 and 8 together. And is there more? Do you have more presentation? Does anybody have any more comments?
What's the 15th look like next? Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, I have one more just tidbit to throw in there. I kind of like the idea of a roundabout too, if it could be done correctly. When you talk about current, modern times, if you look, it was on the news, the Roberta Road roundabout in Concord. I'm gonna argue that that's probably the smallest roundabout I have ever seen in my life. It does have major trucks that go down the road, there's school buses, there's a major middle school right there. It was on the news earlier this week, I'm pretty sure Queen City News was there today, talking about what type of an epic failure that roundabout is. Okay, so, and when you talk about squeezing something small in, that's an example right up the road that's very current. So if you're going to consider a roundabout, you would, either it's gotta be done correctly, or you don't wanna be this news piece that is happening right now. Okay, that was the only thing I wanted.
So December 15th, we're at final strategy master plan draft in progress. Is that where we're gonna be in 2 weeks?
2 weeks, we're gonna be presenting the final master plan.
Okay.
So absolutely share the comments, sooner the better, as we begin to finalize the plan.
And you also,
Jack, do you want to put a, time?
Well, if we can get it in the next 5 working days, that would be wonderful, because we got to get it in the plan, and then get, if we can,
It'd say the 9th, that'd be next week.
Yeah.
Is this-
Go home and work on your comments.
but that's also contingent on having some of this updated and sent back out too, where we know which map and the roundabout and the stop signs.
I mean, the 9th would be fine. If you can get it to me as soon as possible, but the 9th would be,
So Jack, do you have any other comments on next step?
no, we just need comments. The sooner the better. Larry, Dave Hill, and myself will be working furiously to get this information together, so that's all we've got to say. Now, we are still kind of shooting for a joint town board, planning board, steering committee meeting sometime in January. We would, where the steering committee can say, this is the final version of the plan. Yeah, right now, that's obviously got to be, number 16 is the joint tentative downtown plan steering committee, planning board, town board meeting. That's going to be sometime in January where it's kind of turned over. Then it's the planning board and the town board, they take a bite at the apple as well. So that's all I needed to say. That's all.
Larry, you have anything else? Thank you for your presentation. And I assume there are no final comments? Good. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.